Hi everybody, what you see before you are the parts for my final PC build of 2020. When I came up with this build, I had two ideas in mind. One, I didn't want to use any rotational storage, and two, the total price could not exceed $1,300 or that of basically a brand new 2080 Ti. With those 2 points in mind, the solid state PC build was born, and I set about finding my parts. So come along with me as I go over each part and put this PC together. Welcome to the middle of nowhere. While AMD had already announced their Zen 3 CPUs when I was putting my parts together, I felt the 5600X at $299 was a bit out of bounds for me. Thus, I settled for the Zen 2 3600 CPU. It's a 6-core 12-thread processor and is still quite a workhorse even by today's standards. The fact that I also got it $10 lower over MSRP at $189 was just another bonus. Speaking of, you're not going to find the CPU in stock very easily, so if it is the CPU for your next build and you do find it in stock at MSRP or lower, pounce on it. Hit that purchase button, do not wait, because I guarantee you it will not be in stock for long. Next is the motherboard, and I went with MSI's B550A Pro ATX motherboard for $140. I've also done an overview and unboxing video on this motherboard, so if you'd like, feel free to check it out. As with all B550 motherboards, the MSI B550A Pro brings PCIe 4.0 to the table at an affordable cost. It also has loads of other quality of life features such as 8 PWM fan headers, a rear Type-C USB port, as well as an internal Type-C, which is great for those who have a case that will make use of that. It also has a great power delivery, which has been well reviewed as well. While it isn't the cheapest B550 motherboard out there, again, as I said, it does have a lot to offer. But if you're looking to save money on this part, you could always go with something cheaper like ASRock's B550 Phantom Gaming 4, which is a $99 motherboard. Of course, it goes without saying, the less you spend, the less features you're gonna have. So as always, analyze what your needs are and buy accordingly. I knew I wanted DDR4 3600 speed RAM for this build, as 3600 is the sweet spot for Zen 2 and even Zen 3 CPUs. And as a way to save money, I opted to forego any RGB, as that can increase the cost of your RAM by anywhere from $10 to $30. As such, I went with 16 gigabytes of Corsair's Vengeance LPX RAM at DDR4 3600 with a CAS latency of 18. And the only possible drawback to this kit is that 18 CAS latency. However, I couldn't argue with that $65 price point when I saw it, so I just went and bought it. As with the CPU, I bought the RAM when I saw that it was available, as RAM prices have also been fluctuating quite a lot lately. And in fact, it currently costs $10 more than what I paid for. Fortunately, even DDR4 3600 CL16 RAM has become quite affordable. As the making of this video, I just looked at a G.Skill Ripjaws 5 kit of DDR4 3600 CL16, and it only cost $77, or roughly $78, or roughly $13 more than what I paid for this Vengeance kit. Ultimately, if you can find an affordable DDR4 3600 CL16 kit, I say go for it. Now we come to the reason why I've named this build the solid state, and that's the storage. Because SSD prices have come down so much this year, I was able to forego getting any rotational storage and have only 2 solid-state drives for this build. The first drive I'm using is for mass storage, and it's the 1TB Team Group GX2 2.5-inch SATA 3 SSD. It's plenty big enough to install a lot of programs and games, as well as additional files such as music, pictures, or whatever documents you might need. For my OS drive, I'm going with Western Digital's WD Blue SN550 NVMe SSD. And while this is a PCIe 3.0 and not 4.0 drive, I feel for the general user, such as a gamer or office user, it's plenty fast. Unless you're going to be using a lot of data-intensive tasks, unless you're going to be doing a lot of data-intensive tasks that require a lot of reads and writes, you're not going to really get the benefit out of a PCIe 4.0 NVMe drive. So it's better to save that money and put it into something a little bit cheaper so you can put that money into other parts later on in the build, such as your graphics card or CPU. Next up is the case for this PC build. I've had this Corsair Carbide 275R sitting in my basement for a while now, so I thought, hey, why not? Let's use it for this build. I've also done an unboxing and overview video on this component as well, so feel free to check it out. It's a great little case with lots of features, and it comes with 2 120mm 3-pin fans. The only negatives I can see with this case really are the lack of a Type-C port in the front, and the fact that the front panel may cause a little bit of airflow restrictions, leading to higher temps. However, if you feel like modding it, you can to get that increased airflow. And don't worry about screwing up, because Corsair sells spares on their website. Next, we come to the power supply, yet another component that has been harder than hell to find this year and was only made harder or more scarce when NVIDIA announced their RTX 3000 series of GPUs. For my PSU for this build, I opted to go with Antec's 𝐂𝐫𝐿 or 𝐂𝐫𝐿 750 gold power supply. When I found it for $91, I felt that I hit gold, pun intended, and bought the power supply immediately. While it's not modular, all the cables are black, which is one of my few requirements for a CPU, besides working of course, and it also comes with a 7-year warranty. While the Corsair Carbide 275R does have 2 fans, as I previously mentioned, I felt this build was sorely lacking in a little bit of color, so I opted to buy a 3-pack of 𝐲𝐻𝐻's 120mm ARGB fans. They are PWM, but they do use proprietary connectors that you'll connect into a hub that is then SATA powered. Luckily, no Molex here. I'm pretty excited to see how well these perform from a cooling standpoint, as well as how well the lights look. Finally, we come to the GPU for this build, and it's the RTX 3070 Founders Edition from NVIDIA. Luck was on my side on the day of release. I got up early, went down to my computer, had the app open on my phone as well, and kept hitting refresh on the website and also on the app. When the Best Buy product listing showed add to cart, I pounced immediately and paid with Apple Pay so that I didn't have to worry about going through all the checkout rigmarole. And I hope for a lot of you, luck gets to be on your side too, because I know these parts, all the GPUs and all the CPUs that have been released lately, are hard as hell to find. The reason the RTX 3070 fits so well with this build is its relative affordability and the fact that it performs on par and in some cases better than the 2080 Ti, which was the price point that I was kind of trying to beat for this build. So it's a little bit ironic, I don't know, but I'm definitely happy I was able to get one for this build. For those still struggling to get a new GPU as an upgrade to an existing PC build or for their upcoming new PC build, don't give up. I know it's a pain in the butt, I know everything's been out of stock, but a couple of tips I can give to you is, especially if you work from home, is have your website open, constantly hit refresh throughout the day, have your app open for Newegg, because as soon as it will automatically refresh, and as soon as you see that add to cart option, hit it immediately. Additionally, have Apple Pay or Android/Google Pay engaged, because it's like a one-click shop, and that will help you get through that checkout process super quick to beat other people and all those nasty bots. All right, that's all the parts for the solid state PC build. What do you guys think? What tweaks would you make? What would you do to save some money or shuffle money around to get a better part elsewhere? Let me know in the comments down below. But enough about these parts, let's get to building.
You build analyze and deception, raising your weapon. Every word you speak dripping with venom. You're playing with fire, preparing for war. I'm ready to settle the score. You're sounding the alarm while I'm trying to remain in the calm before the storm. I don't wanna fight, 'cause I don't like the way it feels. Those cutting words that never heal. Behind the barricade, you're tossing grenades while I'm trying to settle and disengage. You're playing with fire, preparing for war. I'm ready to settle the score. You're sounding the alarm while I'm trying to remain in the calm before the storm.
And we're back. As you can tell by the change in shirt, it's been a day, but I've got the build completed. So let's go ahead and talk about some of my experiences while building this PC. Building in the 275R was actually a pretty nice experience. The cable management is great, and while the motherboard does fit in snugly, there was no clearance issues when it came to installing the top or fan or getting that motherboard in while keeping the rear fan still installed, which is great. One thing I do feel is a negative is that solid front panel. I do wish it was perforated to allow the 𝐂𝐫𝐿 fans to show off their RGB goodness. Speaking of those fans, they are awesome. The light is really bright. Using the remote control, which I have right here, to adjust the fan speed or adjust the lighting color is great. I do wish, however, that it was compatible with the Mystic Light software. Unfortunately, nothing showed up, even though the fan hub that came with the 𝐂𝐫𝐿 fans does plug into an ARGB header on the motherboard. However, that's not too much of a negative. The fact that you can control it, the only risk that you have is accidentally losing this, of course. It's not magnetic, unfortunately, but you could put some Velcro sticky tape on here and attach to somewhere on the case, probably at the inside, of course. But yeah, the fans, they're quiet, they're easy to adjust rather. There is definitely a learning curve when it comes to all the modes and everything that this controller can do to adjust the fans. So for now, I've just kind of set it to a rotating RGB. Again, they're in the front, so you can't really see any of the color goodness. The computer's off at the moment. So yeah, I would definitely want the 275R Air over the standard Carbide 275R so you could see any RGB that you might have. course, having said that, if you have RGB elsewhere, that will show perfectly fine through the tempered glass window. When it came to the power supply, I was pleasantly surprised. This thing is actually a semi-modular power supply, which I must have forgot because I bought an EVGA power supply on the same day. So one of those two are not semi-modular at all, so I'm gonna go and think that it's that EVGA one. The downside to this PSU is the GPU and supplemental power cables for the CPU weren't very clearly identifiable. No cable was labeled whatsoever, so I had to rely on the little instructions packet, which is fine, but it would have been nice to see PCI or whatever on the cable itself. Fortunately, I figured out the GPU and CPU cables in the end. The GPU power cables are 6+2 and the CPU supplemental are 4+4. Now, another negative that I did not have fun with at all with regards to this PSU is the actual installation. The screw holes didn't always line up, and in fact they were sometimes hard to identify when compared to the other perforation holes on the PSU. In the end I got it installed, and I don't know really where to place the blame on this because I think it's a combination of both the case and the PSU, not one or the other. The case does have some rubber standoffs to probably help prevent vibration, and those are actually keeping the PSU from being totally aligned with these screw-in points. Setting up the PC initially was quite easy. Installing Windows went without a hitch. There was just a lot of updates to install, of course, and navigating through the BIOS to set the XMP profile for the RAM was also quite easy. I didn't even have to go into advanced mode. There's a nice little toggle button right at the top of the easy mode of the BIOS. The only thing I really set in the BIOS was that XMP profile and a CPU fan hardware failure alert. Other than that, the BIOS is pretty straightforward. One thing I will say is updating the drivers, like the chipset drivers, the Realtek audio, and the LAN. I tried using MSI's Dragon software, and while those things seem to install pretty easily, when it came to updating the BIOS through the Dragon software, which is something I just, for me anyway, prefer to do, it didn't take. I went ahead and installed the BIOS from Dragon Center, it rebooted the machine and just hung. So what I ended up having to do was actually jump the clear CMOS jumper, and all I did there was bridge the two points by using a screwdriver. Rebooted the machine, it was set to factory defaults, reset the XMP and that alert, and then afterwards I entered flash mode. I had installed the BIOS file onto a USB thumb drive, put that in the machine, went into flash mode, it recognized the thumb drive immediately, I navigated to the file, and in 10 minutes it updated quite easily. So this was great. Overall, the build process for the solid-state PC build went quite smoothly, and through the course of my testing of the various video games that I benchmarked, it performs great, it's snappy, and I could play video games at 1440p on pretty much high settings. Speaking of video games, let's go ahead and jump into the benchmarks where I'll show you what frames I got and at the various settings and some of my commentary on that as well. I ran GTA on the highest settings and didn't really touch anything other than to remove any FPS cap. I actually had to play the first mission before being able to use the benchmark, so it was good to also get a gameplay experience in. The game performs amazingly well on highest settings, and while I know it's an ancient game, it holds up supremely well by today's standards. When I first booted Fortnite up, I had everything set to Epic and turned off frame caps as the only change. Needless to say, while Fortnite isn't the most demanding of games, even this system couldn't handle everything at Epic. There was severe hitching, and the 1% and 0.1% lows were horrible. As such, I did a tweaked settings loadout, which didn't affect the quality of graphics too much, and I was able to increase my gameplay infinitely. Control is such a fun game, and I'm gonna have to actually finish it one day. My son did on the PS4, and he loved it. For this game, I went through the various preset settings with DLSS both turned off and on, and then with DLSS on and ray tracing on high. Since there's no benchmark for this game, I just kept playing and adjusting the settings after a certain period of time, roughly 5 minutes per setting. There were some cutscenes, so it's possible that those are the reason there are some low 0.1% lows. Regardless of the settings, I feel the game was very playable on this PC, but there were some noticeable drops when ray tracing was turned on, just not enough to make it a bad playing experience. For the last game I tested, I did the Shadow of the Tomb Raider benchmark. As with Control, I set the game to a preset, then had DLSS off, on, and then DLSS on with Ray Trace Shadow set to high. You'll notice the DLSS doesn't seem to really affect performance, so either it's not properly implemented in this game or something else is amiss on my part. For whatever reason, Shadow of the Tomb Raider is a pain in the butt to get the 0.1% lows and 1% lows increased from setting to setting. This game requires some genuine custom settings tweaking if you want to increase those to 2 FPS numbers. Finally, due to being frustrated at being unable to get my 1% and 0.1% lows up, I did one final run with custom high settings with DLSS on and ray tracing shadows set to medium. And as you can see, when comparing to the high settings with DLSS on and ray tracing set to high, I was able to improve my 0.1% and 1% lows. To cap things off, here are the temperatures I recorded while the PC was at idle and during benchmark and play sessions for the CPU and GPU respectively. During the play sessions, I did have the side and front panels off with an ambient room temperature of 20 degrees Celsius. And when I recorded the idle temperature, the front panel and side panel had actually already been put on, and the ambient room temperature was still the same at 20 degrees Celsius. So you can see that the temps aren't terribly too bad, but I do want to keep my eye out on that CPU temperature. Overall, the solid-state PC build is great. Installation went off without a hitch, other than with the PSU, of course. The components all work well together. I had no issues whatsoever there. Getting all the driver updates and chipset updates and everything like that, while time consuming, also went without a hitch. The only thing I have concern for is the idle temperature and the low temperature for the CPU. I think if I were to do an upgrade for this system, the first thing I would upgrade is to get an aftermarket cooler that could handle the CPU a bit better and keep it much cooler. However, other than that, this thing does everything I want it to do, which is play games at 1440p on high or a mixture of high settings, and it costs less than a brand new 2080 Ti. What else could you ask for? And well, that's all I have to say about the new PC build right here. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you like what you saw, hit that like button. You can show your support for the channel by getting subscribed, and don't forget to click the notification icon so you don't miss out on any future content. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this PC build, so leave your comments or questions down below. I'm Seth, and I'll see you next time in the middle of nowhere.